With all of these cars these days in 2026 that have junk engines that are catastrophically failing, it begs the question, where are the best engines available? It's so frustrating to me because I love reliable engines, but I like fun engines, and even that's an important factor, but they're taking the fun away when you spend all of your time in the service shop. The fact is, looking at a Toyota, their new turbo V6s are junk. GM and their V8s are trash with the L87 blowing rods and all kinds of issues there. The 1.5 Hondas as well as the 1.5's Volkswagens. Not great engines, and they're full of issues. It seems you can't even find a quality engine anymore. I'm going to pull out of the tickle trunk the best, most reliable engines you can still find in the 2026 model years. Make some notes, sit back, grab a cup of coffee. Let's get into it now. The first most reliable engine you're going to find, and some of the vehicles you can find them in I'll share as well, is Toyota's 4-cylinder naturally aspirated 2.5-liter 4-banger. Yeah, they make maybe 203 horsepower. They do include the port and direct fuel injection called the D4S, which essentially eliminates the issues with carbon fouling across the intake valves. That's something that a lot of direct engines suffer from, and Toyota's virtually eliminated that issue with these engines, and that's a huge win. And that engine is Toyota's A25-A FKS and the A25A FXS. They are totally compatible with the standard drivetrain, and they're also compatible with the hybrid drive. But you can find them in Toyotas, you can find them in Lexus vehicles, and a lot of the Lexus products that I speak of regularly, like the Lexus NX350H or the Lexus RX350H, a lot of those feature that engine. Even the base model in the 250 has a very similar engine as this. So if you're buying a brand new Lexus hybrid this year in 2026, more often than not, you're going to find it has one of these engines in it, and it's built to last. There's no shocker when we talk reliability. This engine is associated with one of the most reliable SUVs on the market in 26, and that's the Toyota RAV4. As a matter of fact, when you search NHTSA and you look at complaints, there are very few, if any, complaints related to this vehicle. They just simply run. And because of this unstressed and reliable platform, they've got proven miles of 200,000 to 300,000 miles. The only real problem outside of issues related to, say, electrical gremlins or the odd recall like a backup camera, you can find the odd problem with a water pump that might be seeping a little bit of coolant. The hybrid variants have the odd recall or cooling issues from time to time, and an occasional high-pressure fuel pump whine or a noise. Those are a few and far between. Oil consumption could be an issue with the low-pressure rings or the low-tension rings, but ultimately, it's just an engine that works reliably year over year, mile over mile. Take care of your maintenance, and you're going to find these will literally almost last forever. You can find these absolutely ruthlessly reliable engines in the base Highlander. You can find it in the Camry carryover because that is now almost exclusively hybrid. And on top of it, Lexus products, a lot of their hybrid vehicles have that, including even the new Lexus ES, where you have the ES, the hybrid drive, of course, does offer up that 2.5-liter inline-4 strapped up to the hybrid drive. Again, NX series of vehicles, RX series of vehicles, and a lot of their smaller to mid-size vehicles that run that 4-cylinder drivetrain, you'll find them. This is the model, this is the engine, and it is one of the most reliable you can still buy in 26. Second engine from my experience that is absolute bulletproof reliability. We're talking about the 2GR FKS engine, and it's basically a 3.5-liter V6. You can get a 6-speed or an 8-speed automatic transmission bolted up to that 311 horsepower natural aspirated V6. Now, a couple of key features to note with these engines is they have the dual port and direct fuel injection. The direct injection, like a lot of engines, give you better economy, better precise metering for the fueling, but on top of it, you're going to get the port injection to wash the intake valves, and you're not going to have that issue like the D4S engines that we already described in the previous 4-cylinder engine by Toyota. These are absolutely ruthless. Water pumps, the odd time here and there, but predominantly because it's a longitudinal engine, access to things like coil packs, access to spark plugs, those are relatively simple. Same thing even with oxygen sensors. Now, some of these products, of course, when they're turned sideways, some of the older engines like the ES, when you find the engine sitting transversely mounted, some of the access to plugs, coils, O2 sensors are a little bit awkward. That's a bit of a drawback, but it's a very, very reliable engine, and so reliable, in fact, that's why Toyota keeps this one around. These are known to run well in excess of 300,000 miles, and other than a couple of minor little issues like a water pump that has been known to fail, Sure, get that replaced. That's a maintenance item anyway. The oil cooler line, that's been a little bit of a leaker from time to time, as well as some of the earlier VVTi lines before they actually had the update. They did have the possibility of leaking. Yeah, those are the lines that create that pressurized oil for the variable valve timing. And that wasn't an uncommon issue, but there has been an update since, and most of the cars that had that issue were retroactively repaired, and everything going forward is generally good. It's an absolute workhorse and bulletproof engine that was built to last literally forever. And sadly, you could find it in the older outgoing models like the ES350, the older RX350, the older Highlander, and even the older V6, which may still be in fact available in certain markets, just not necessarily here. That V6 is largely available only in the IS350 today. Sadly, the mainstream in North America has all but eliminated it for the Toyota products as well as the Lexus products. So I still truly believe this is one of the most reliable engines you can find anywhere. They don't burn oil. They sound great when you rev them out. They don't have a ton of torque, but they have a great, powerful, punchy engine when you get the revs up. You don't have to do a lot of maintenance because things generally don't break. Do your oil servicing, change your brakes and tires, and you're good to go. Cars mean more to you than just basic mode of transportation, and you want to join a community that actually cares about the fun driving experience? Exotic Car Play Place. Grab your merch just like this right down below. Click and link. You're good to go. Before we get to number 3, you've got to note that, of course, there's going to be a common denominator with all of these vehicles. And I'd like to see who's the first person to write down there what that common factor is. There's something common to each one of these engines that makes them some of the most reliable drivetrains on the market. You'll find out what it is at the end. The third one is the Mazda SkyActiv-G engines. Specifically, the naturally aspirated 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine called the PY-VPS or the PY-VPTS engine. From my experience, everybody I know who's owned these, I've got friends that own these vehicles and they swear by them. They've purchased Mazda after Mazda after Mazda because they know they've got that little hidden secret and that gem. Mazda has a product that's worth buying. While everybody's out there getting sucker punched buying these junky cars, Mazda's got a product that's been there all along. The Mazda SkyActiv-G is a great engine. Very few complaints. Look at the forums. My friends tell me the same, but even NHTSA also shows a very low density of complaints. Very few people have much to say negative about it. I mean, there are cases where a little bit of minor oil consumption with the turbo engine versions, but basically most people would agree that the Mazda 2.5 is an absolute workhorse. They are built to run 2 to 250,000 miles, and maybe they don't go quite as far as Toyota's 2.5, but guess what? It's close. But these are a more fun driving experience. So you get the non-turbo at about 187 horsepower or the turbo version coming out with about 250 horsepower. Now, as well, to note there's been a few little issues. Cylinder deactivation in the NA versions to step into the turbos, it seems to go away. They pretty much eliminated that feature, but there are some issues in very rare numbers. Of course, there were cylinder head cracks in a few of the earlier generations, gone and non-existent today. As well as the carbon buildup you're finding due to the direct injection system in a lot of these engines, it's largely manageable, something with a little bit of maintenance can take care of. Now, it's not quite as robust as the Toyota system or the Lexus system, but it's an easy thing to maintain and very manageable. Now, you can find these engines in a host of different Mazda products like the CX-5, the CX-50, the Mazda 6, and the Mazda 3, which is one of my favorites. The reason I love the Mazda 3 so much is because you can get in the naturally aspirated format with a manual gearbox and front-wheel drive. It's as basic, raw, fun little driving experience as you could possibly imagine. If you're bored with that, step into the turbo, the GT version for 250 horsepower, and you get a wallop in the pants. And trust me, it's zingy, it's zippy. They're fun little cars, but they're reliable. And that's the beauty with a car that runs over 250,000 miles. What more could you ask from a modern-day engine? Especially when you get junk like the 1.5s over there by Honda with the oil and fuel dilution issues, or even GM and their 5.3 and the cylinder deactivation blowing lifters. And the little EA888 engines by Volkswagen, which burn oil like it's going out of style. Mazda is such a fine product, and these engines are so underrated. Good friends of mine run these vehicles. People I've worked with these run these vehicles, and I could truly attest Mazda really has nailed with these 2.5s. Definitely, you've got to give it a look, and they do rank very highly. Now, you're probably wondering, where's Honda in all of this game? You're on the money, because yes, Honda actually has an engine that's worth buying. It's called the K20C2 or the K20C4. basically a 2-liter naturally aspirated or a 2-liter turbocharged engine that you're finding in their base trim now, which they brought back out of the dead, and as well in their hotter models. I mean, the 1.5 was what they were going to. That was their go-to in a lot of Civics as well as the CR-Vs, but we started to see a lot of problems. Blown head gaskets, oil consumption, and unfortunately oil and fuel dilution meant that sometimes it took out the engine. They were literal trash. We had an older 2-liter as well, and that engine was bulletproof. So were some of the older 1.8s. Their naturally aspirated engines were workhorses. And I'm here to deliver some good news. If you're looking for a Honda, you can still find some reliable ones. Now, it hurts me to say this because Honda does have that beautiful 3.5-liter V6, but there's a couple of drawbacks there. I do consider them generally pretty reliable, but there are 2 caveats. One, it still runs a timing belt, where Lexus 3.5 doesn't. It's a chain. In the Honda world, you have to do maintenance. It's something like every 80 or 90 or 100,000 miles, somewhere in there. Check your manual. But you have to take the timing belt and replace that. You do the water pump and pulleys, and then you're good to go. But the bigger issue is there's been a bunch of batches of engines with rod bearing issues and all kinds of bottom end failures. So there's been a lot of owners with issues with the engine. So buyer beware on the 3.5. Check NHTSA for those specific recalls and the batch numbers. But you're totally safe with this 2-liter. This 2-liter has nothing to do with that 3.5 and is absolutely a workhorse and is bulletproof. Now, the performance isn't really going to shake your world. I mean, 158 horsepower in the base model or 180 to 252 horsepower in the turbocharged versions, those feel a little more sprightly, but they're not all that energized. Now, the top trim turbo obviously competes directly with Mazda's 2.5 and the turbo in the GT models, but they're both reliable. These are both great options. Fortunately, due to the history and what we know Honda has typically built with these engines, they're good for 200,000 to 300,000 miles. You want an engine that's going to be low on fuel, low on maintenance costs, and long on lifespan? This is your engine. The best result is always go with the NA versions. You don't have any real systemic issues. If you want the turbo engine, some of the earlier models up to about 2018, 2019, even the turbos, they had some oil and fuel dilutions, even in the 2-liter. So with frequent oil services, give it a proper warm up without getting on the throttle too hard when it's cold, and give it plenty of time to warm down and do longer trips instead of shorter trips. All of these administrative features will help you extend the life of even any of those 2-liter or even the 1.5. But the facts remain is the longevity comes best with the naturally aspirated 2-liter in these Honda engines. You can find this in the Acura Integra. As we know, being able to roll your own gears in certain model trims means a fun driving experience. I love the Integra. It's fun, it's honest. Even though it's really not much more than a glorified Civic, it still has the spirit, and it's still fun to drive. But you can also find these engines in the Civic as well as the Accord. Now, the fifth one might even shock you. You know, I was looking for trucks the other day, and GM, their 5.3s are junk, 6.2s are junk, they're blowing rods. What do you have over in Dodgeland or Rams? Well, you've got the Hurricane, it's untested, and the older 5.7 Hemis, the camshafts and the lifters all eat themselves from the inside out. So what's left now that even Nissan pulled their Titan off the market? Well, guess what? The Ford F-150 as well as the Ford Mustang has an engine that is absolutely bulletproof. I can't even believe this engine flies under the radar. Now, it's a very popular drive and many people do recognize this, but it shocks me that more people aren't buying these, and we're talking about the Coyote 5-liter V8 naturally aspirated engine by Ford. Now, it's easily one of the most reliable modern-day full-size truck engines. As a matter of fact, complaints are relatively low on it because there's no turbo complexity, no issues with that. Now, unfortunately, Ford has a 10-speed automatic transmission that's causing a lot of problems and heartburn for people, but it's not so much the engine. The engine itself is an absolute workhorse. It's been around for a while. The beauty is it has about 400 horsepower, 5-liter displacement, dual port and direct fuel injection, just like Toyota. That was one of the key ingredients that provided additional reliability and longevity for those engines. Reduced maintenance, improved reliability. What's not to love? Now, it's very common to find a lot of these 5-liter Coyote of the third generation to put on 400,000 miles with very little maintenance. There are a few issues, though, to consider. Yes, the transmission is something that sadly has to go with the truck and that engine. On top of it, timing chains with very high miles, they can stretch. You might get that little crink or that rattle on startup. Outside of that, it's a reliable drive. Some customers have complained about oil consumption with these, and of course, naturally, the wet belt system isn't necessarily the best system going right now. But if you're looking for any of these full-size trucks, most of them now are rocking turbocharged engines, like over in Fordland. They're using a lot of their 2.7s, 3s, and 3.5s. And while the 3.5 V8 is pretty robust. They have a host of issues that seem to just drag along. More complexity, turbos, wastegates, and a host of other plumbing that just means they're far more complex. The 5-liter V8 is a simple, reliable, robust drivetrain that I can't believe more people aren't buying. And yes, they actually are reliable. That's right, you heard it here. There's not too many Fords that I will truly give praise to for max reliability, but this is one of them that makes the list. But before I share the common factor with why these are the 5 that are the most reliable, there's a few things to consider. Sadly, there's some engines that won't make this list. Toyota and their 3.4-liter V6, it's called the V35A, and sadly, it's been a host and a source of over 100,000 recalls, including the Toyota Tundra, the Lexus GX550, and the Lexus LX600. Sadly, it's the engine I really wanted to love. It's the platforms I really wanted to love, but they're not built to last right now. And sadly, the 3.5-liter V6 Honda J35 is also one I really want to love. And I do love it, but it still comes with a caveat because the timing belt, but most importantly, because some of them are eating up the bottom end of the engine. It just hurts me. And now, sadly, as we transition to a market with so many little engines, a lot of these 1.5s, a lot of these small little 2-liter turbo engines all over with direct fuel injection means they're plugging off with carbon. High internal heat and pressure means a lot of them just aren't lasting. So basically, those are engines that are not built to last today. The engines that do last, which is common with all of these 5, are engines that generally don't come with turbocharging. That's right, they are engines that are last of a dying breed. Engines that we used to drive 10, 15, 20 years ago. There weren't turbos. They didn't have direct injection. A lot of these reliable engines we used to know were simple. Port injection, a V6, a V8, no turbos, manual gearbox, that's as reliable as it gets. There's a couple of great videos as well, but if you want to join the membership program, I've got that going and it's building, it's showing a community of like-minded people where I can show, videos, get behind the scenes and shares a little extra detail about what makes Exotic Car Play Place such a great community. Hope to see each and every one of you real soon, everybody. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.